In the heart of downtown, nestled between a vintage bookstore and a modern art gallery, stood Beans and Brews, a quaint cafe that had become a haven for locals seeking both caffeine and community. This is where our story begins, where Alex Turner had been working as a barista for the past 3 years. Alex wasn't just any barista. He was the kind who remembered your order after meeting you once, who could tell what kind of day you were having by the way you approached the counter, and who infused every cup with a passion that transformed ordinary coffee into something magical. Alex had always been drawn to the art of coffee making. Growing up in a small town with parents who viewed coffee as merely a utilitarian beverage, he discovered his passion during a gap year in Italy. There, in the narrow streets of Florence, he fell in love with the ritual of espresso, the community that gathered around small cafe tables, and the way a perfectly crafted cup could bring strangers together. This wasn't just about caffeine. It was about connection, about creating moments of joy in the mundane rhythm of everyday life. Now, at 27, Alex had a dream that kept him awake at night, sketching business plans and decor ideas in a worn leather notebook. He wanted his own cafe, not just any cafe, but a space that would feel like an extension of his living room, where art would hang on exposed brick walls, where local musicians would play on weekend evenings, and where his carefully sourced beans would be the foundation of something beautiful. For now, though, he was content learning the business from the ground up, saving tips in a special account labeled Someday Cafe. Beans and Brews had a charm that couldn't be manufactured. The cafe occupied what had once been an old apothecary, with high ceilings, large windows that flooded the space with natural light, and original wooden floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot. The owner, Eleanor, had preserved the old wooden shelving behind the counter, now housing an impressive collection of coffee beans from around the world instead of medicinal herbs. The tables were mismatched, collected from estate sales and antique shops, each with its own history. In the corner, a small stage accommodated local poets on Thursdays and acoustic musicians on Saturdays. The regulars were as much a part of the cafe's character as the physical space. There was Professor Jenkins, who came in every morning at precisely 7:45 for his Americano and graded papers in the corner until noon. The group of retired teachers who occupied the large round table by the window on Tuesday afternoons, their laughter punctuating the ambient music. The art students from the nearby university who sketched in silence, fueled by cold brew and inspiration. And then there were the remote workers, laptops open and headphones on, who treated the cafe as their office, ordering refills throughout the day and becoming part of the furniture. Alex knew them all, their names, their stories, their coffee preferences. He found joy in this knowledge, in being a constant in their lives, a friendly face who could brighten their day with the perfect drink and a genuine, "How are you?" He took pride in creating a space where people felt seen, where the simple act of remembering someone liked an extra shot of vanilla could make them feel valued. It was on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in October when Jamie first walked into Beans and Brews. The bell above the door chimed, and Alex looked up from the espresso machine to see a tall figure shaking water from an umbrella. There was something immediately striking about Jamie. Perhaps it was the thoughtful eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, or the slightly disheveled dark hair, or maybe the way he seemed to take in the entire cafe with appreciative curiosity. Jamie approached the counter with a warm smile that created a small dimple in his left cheek. "Hi there," he said, his voice a pleasant baritone. "First time here. What would you recommend for someone who needs serious brain fuel for an afternoon of writing?" Alex felt an unexpected flutter in his chest. "Welcome to Beans and Brews," he replied, leaning slightly on the counter. "Writing, huh? What kind? That might influence my recommendation." Jamie laughed, a sound that somehow fit perfectly with the jazz playing softly in the background. "I'm working on my doctoral thesis in literature. Today's chapter is on the evolution of queer subtext in early 20th century American poetry. So I need something that will keep me alert but won't make me jittery enough to start seeing symbolism where there isn't any." Alex couldn't help but smile. "Sounds fascinating. I think you need our single-origin Ethiopian. It's bright with notes of bergamot and honey, complex enough to keep your palate interested but smooth enough to avoid the caffeine jitters. I can do it as a pour-over if you're not in a rush." "That sounds perfect," Jamie nodded, looking impressed. "I appreciate someone who takes coffee as seriously as I take literary analysis." As Alex prepared the pour-over, carefully controlling the water flow over the freshly ground beans, he found himself unusually aware of Jamie watching him work. There was something different about this customer, a curiosity, an attentiveness that made Alex want to explain each step of the process. "The water temperature is crucial," Alex found himself saying. Too hot, and you extract too many bitter compounds. Too cool, and you miss the subtle notes that make this bean special. Jamie nodded, genuinely interested. It's like writing in a way. The details matter. Get the fundamentals wrong, and the whole thing falls apart. When the coffee was ready, Alex slid it across the counter in a ceramic mug featuring a hand-painted blue design. Find a comfortable spot. Let me know what you think. Jamie chose a small table near the window, where the rain created patterns on the glass. Alex found his eyes drifting to that corner more often than necessary as he served other customers. There was something compelling about the way Jamie's brow furrowed in concentration, the way he occasionally pushed his glasses up his nose, the small smile that appeared when he took a sip of coffee. An hour later, Jamie approached the counter again. You were right about the coffee. Perfect brain fuel. I've written more in the last hour than I did all morning at the library. Alex felt a disproportionate sense of satisfaction. Glad to hear it. We aim to facilitate creativity and productivity. Well, consider me facilitated, Jamie replied with that dimpled smile. I think I found my new writing spot. I'm Jamie, by the way. Jamie Chin. Alex Turner. And I'm happy to be your new coffee supplier. That first meeting set the stage for what would become a comfortable routine. Jamie began appearing at Beans and Brews 3 or 4 times a week, always with his laptop and a stack of books. He usually arrived in the early afternoon and stayed until closing, ordering different coffees based on Alex's recommendations and occasionally a pastry when his concentration needed a sugar boost. Their interactions evolved from the standard barista customer exchange to something more personal. Jamie would ask Alex about the coffee he was trying, where the beans came from, the roasting process, why certain brewing methods brought out different flavors. Alex found himself sharing knowledge he usually kept to himself, delighted by Jamie's genuine interest. Coffee is like wine, Alex explained one day as he prepared a Chemex for Jamie. The terroir, the soil, climate, altitude where it's grown, it all affects the flavor profile. These beans from Guatemala have a chocolate undertone because of the volcanic soil and high altitude. Jamie listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was really absorbing the information. In turn, Jamie would share snippets about his research, explaining concepts in a way that made even complex literary theory accessible and interesting. I'm looking at how poets like Walt Whitman and Hart Crane encoded their sexuality in their work, Jamie explained one afternoon. They were writing at a time when being openly gay wasn't an option, so they developed this rich symbolic language. It's like they were hiding in plain sight, speaking to those who would understand while maintaining plausible deniability for everyone else. Alex found himself fascinated, not just by the subject matter, but by Jamie's passion for it. There was something captivating about someone who cared so deeply about their work, who could see layers of meaning where others might miss them entirely. As weeks passed, their conversations expanded beyond coffee and literature. They discovered shared interests in indie films and hiking. Both had grown up in small towns before moving to the city for greater opportunities and acceptance. Both valued their independence, but sometimes felt the weight of solitude in a busy urban landscape. Alex learned that Jamie had come out to his traditional Chinese-American family during his undergraduate years, resulting in a period of tension that had gradually evolved into cautious acceptance. Jamie discovered that Alex had known he was gay since high school but had found his conservative hometown suffocating, which fueled his desire to create welcoming spaces for others. These exchanges happened in snippets, a few minutes of conversation when the cafe was quiet, or during the lull before closing time when Jamie would linger, helping to stack chairs or wipe down tables while they talked. There was an ease between them, a natural rhythm to their interactions that felt both comfortable and charged with potential. Other regulars began to notice. Professor Jenkins raised an eyebrow knowingly when Alex spent extra time at Jamie's table explaining the differences between light and dark roasts. Eleanor, the cafe owner, caught Alex watching Jamie from behind the counter and simply smiled, saying nothing but somehow communicating volumes. Alex found himself looking forward to the days when Jamie would appear, feeling a small thrill when the bell chimed and that now familiar figure walked through the door. He began experimenting with new coffee drinks, eager to surprise Jamie with something special. Jamie, in turn, started bringing books he thought Alex might enjoy, leaving them with notes tucked inside explaining why he'd chosen them. It was a connection building slowly, carefully, neither of them rushing or pushing, both seemingly content to let whatever was happening between them unfold naturally. There was flirtation, certainly, in the lingering glances, the casual touches when Alex handed over a mug, the way Jamie would sometimes read aloud passages he thought Alex would appreciate, his voice taking on a different quality that seemed meant just for him. Then came the evening that would change everything. It was a Thursday in December, nearly 2 months after Jamie had first walked into Beans and Brews. The cafe was closing early for Eleanor's birthday celebration, and Alex was the only staff member on duty. The last customers had left, and Alex was wiping down the espresso machine when he realized Jamie was still there, deeply absorbed in his writing. "Hey, time traveler," Alex called out. "We're closing up shop. Eleanor's birthday dinner awaits." Jamie looked up, blinking as if emerging from another world. "Oh, I completely lost track of time. Sorry about that." He glanced around at the empty cafe, the chairs already stacked, the lights dimmed. "Wow, I really was in the zone. Must be some fascinating poetry you're analyzing," Alex said, approaching Jamie's table with a cloth to wipe it down. "Actually, I was working on something different tonight." Jamie hesitated, then turned his laptop slightly. "I'm trying my hand at writing my own poetry. Nothing scholarly, just personal expression." Alex felt honored by this small confidence. "That's amazing. Would you share some of it?" Jamie shook his head, a flush creeping up his neck. "Not yet. It's still too raw. Maybe someday." As Jamie packed up his things, Alex finished the closing routine, counting the register, sweeping the floor, turning off the coffee machines. Outside, the December evening had brought an early darkness and a light snow that transformed the street into something from a holiday card. "It's really coming down out there," Alex observed, peering through the window as he pulled on his coat. Jamie joined him at the window, standing close enough that Alex could smell his cologne, something with notes of cedar and bergamot. "Beautiful, though. I love the first real snow of the season. Everything feels possible. Something about the moment, the empty cafe, the snow falling gently outside, the warm proximity of Jamie beside him, gave Alex a surge of courage. I still have some of that special Kenyan roast at my apartment. The one you said was your favorite last week. If you're not in a rush, maybe you'd like to come over for a proper cup? My place is just 2 blocks away." The invitation hung in the air between them, loaded with more meaning than the simple words conveyed. Alex felt his heart beating rapidly as Jamie turned to look at him, those thoughtful eyes searching his face. "I'd like that," Jamie said finally, his voice soft but certain. "I'd like that very much." They walked the 2 blocks to Alex's apartment in comfortable conversation, their shoulders occasionally brushing, their breath visible in the cold air. Alex lived in a converted warehouse building, an open-concept studio with high ceilings, large windows, and exposed brick walls. It wasn't large, but he had made it distinctly his own, bookshelves filled with coffee table books on art and travel, a collection of vintage coffee equipment displayed on open shelving, plants thriving on every available surface, and a small upright piano in the corner. "This is so you," Jamie said as he looked around, removing his snow-dusted coat. "It feels like walking into your mind." Alex laughed, hanging their coats on hooks by the door. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "Definitely good," Jamie assured him, moving to examine the coffee equipment with interest. "Your coffee shrine is impressive. Some people collect stamps. I collect ways to make coffee," Alex shrugged, moving to the kitchen area. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll get started on that Kenyan I promised you." As Alex prepared the coffee, Jamie wandered around the apartment, looking at books and photographs, occasionally asking questions about items that caught his attention. There was something intimate about having Jamie in his personal space, seeing the parts of his life that existed outside the cafe. "So this is where the magic happens," Jamie said, gesturing toward a small desk in the corner where sketches and notes were spread out. Alex nodded, measuring coffee beans into a grinder. "That's where I work on my cafe plans. Nothing concrete yet, just ideas and dreams." Jamie picked up one of the sketches, a floor plan with notes about seating arrangements and flow. "These are really good, Alex. Detailed. Have you looked into locations yet?" "I have my eye on a few possibilities," Alex admitted. "But the financial part is still a hurdle. Commercial real estate in this city isn't cheap, and banks aren't exactly lining up to loan money to baristas with big dreams." "Don't sell yourself short," Jamie said, his voice serious. "You're not just a barista. You're an artist. The way you talk about coffee, the way you understand flavors and experiences, that's something special." The sincerity in Jamie's voice made Alex pause, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the steam rising from the kettle. "Thank you. That means a lot." Alex finished preparing the coffee, a pour-over method that highlighted the bright, fruity notes of the Kenyan beans. He brought 2 mugs to the small couch where Jamie had settled, sitting down beside him, close enough that their knees almost touched. The moment of truth, Alex said, handing Jamie a mug. Different water, different environment. Let's see if it tastes the same as at the cafe. Jamie took a careful sip, closing his eyes to focus on the flavor. Even better, he declared after a moment. There's something about drinking coffee in the place where someone lives. It tastes more authentic somehow. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, sipping their coffee, the only sounds the soft jazz playing from Alex's speakers and the occasional whoosh of cars passing on the snowy street below. Can I ask you something? Jamie said finally, turning slightly to face Alex. Why coffee? What made you decide to build your life around it? Alex considered the question, cradling his mug between his hands. Coffee brings people together, he said slowly. In a world where so much is digital and distant, a good cafe is still a place where people connect face to face. I love being part of that, creating a space where someone might meet a new friend, or find the courage to start writing that novel, or just have a moment of peace in a hectic day. He paused, then continued more softly. And maybe it's also because growing up, I never really had a place where I felt I belonged. Being gay in a small conservative town, I always felt like I was performing, hiding parts of myself. I want to create a place where nobody has to do that, where everyone can just be. Jamie's eyes were warm with understanding. That's beautiful, Alex. And important. Spaces like that save lives, you know? Having somewhere to go where you can breathe freely, it matters more than people realize. What about you? Alex asked. Why poetry? Why queer subtext in particular? Jamie set his mug down on the coffee table. I think I'm searching for ancestors in a way. Finding the people who came before us, who found ways to express their truth even when it wasn't safe to do so. There's something powerful about recognizing coded language, about reading between the lines and finding yourself reflected there. He smiled, a little self-consciously. Plus, I'm fascinated by how much can be communicated without being explicitly stated. How tension and desire can exist in the spaces between words. As he spoke, Alex became acutely aware of the space between them on the couch, small but significant, charged with possibility. Jamie seemed to realize it too, his eyes dropping briefly to Alex's lips before meeting his gaze again. Like now? Alex asked softly. Exactly like now, Jamie confirmed, his voice equally quiet. Alex wasn't sure who moved first. Perhaps they both did, drawn together by the same invisible force. Their lips met hesitantly at first, a gentle question being asked and answered. Then Jamie's hand came up to cup Alex's face, and the kiss deepened, becoming more certain, more honest. When they finally pulled apart, Alex felt slightly dazed, his heart racing. Jamie looked equally affected, his glasses slightly askew, a flush across his cheekbones. I've been wanting to do that since you explained the difference between washed and natural processed coffee beans, Jamie admitted with a small laugh. That was weeks ago, Alex exclaimed. Why didn't you say something? Jamie shrugged, adjusting his glasses. I wasn't sure if you were just being a friendly barista or if there was something more. And I didn't want to make things awkward if I was reading the situation wrong. The cafe is important to me. You're important to me. And I didn't want to risk losing that. Alex reached for Jamie's hand, interlacing their fingers. I've been interested since you walked in and started talking about queer subtext and poetry. But I was trying to be professional. Eleanor has a strict, don't hit on the customers policy. Well, Jamie said, squeezing Alex's hand, technically, we're not in the cafe right now. And I'm not a customer at the moment. I'm just a guy who thinks the barista is pretty amazing. They talked for hours after that, the coffee long finished, their bodies gradually shifting closer until Jamie's head rested on Alex's shoulder, their hands still intertwined. They shared stories from their childhoods, talked about past relationships that hadn't worked out, discussed favorite books and films and places they wanted to visit someday. I should probably go, Jamie said eventually, glancing at his watch. It's after midnight, and I have a meeting with my advisor tomorrow morning. Neither of them moved, reluctant to break the spell of intimacy that had enveloped them. Or you could stay, Alex suggested, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. Just to sleep. I mean, it's still snowing and cabs will be hard to find, and I'd like it if you stayed. Jamie's smile was answer enough, but he said it anyway. I'd like that too. They fell asleep together on Alex's bed, fully clothed except for their shoes, Jamie's arm draped across Alex's waist, their breathing gradually synchronizing. It was the most natural thing in the world, as if they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. The morning brought a new kind of intimacy, the vulnerability of waking up together, hair mussed and eyes still heavy with sleep. They shared a breakfast of toast and fruit, Alex making them coffee with yet another brewing method, explaining the nuances of the technique while Jamie watched with undisguised affection. "So what happens now?" Jamie asked as they stood at the door, both reluctant for him to leave despite the responsibilities waiting for them both. "Now," Alex said, taking Jamie's hand, "we see where this goes. No pressure, no rush. Just us, figuring things out together." "I like the sound of that," Jamie replied, leaning in for one more kiss before reluctantly stepping out into the bright winter morning. The following weeks brought a shift in their routine. Jamie still came to the cafe to work, but now there were knowing glances exchanged across the room, private smiles that held the weight of shared secrets. After closing, they would often go to Alex's apartment or Jamie's small campus-adjacent flat, cooking dinner together, talking for hours, gradually learning the geography of each other's bodies and hearts. It wasn't all smooth sailing. They had their first argument 3 weeks in, a misunderstanding about plans that left both of them frustrated and hurt. Jamie sometimes got so absorbed in his work that he seemed to disappear emotionally, becoming distant and preoccupied. Alex worried about the practicality of their relationship, about what would happen when Jamie finished his doctorate and potentially moved away for a teaching position. But they talked through these challenges, learning how to navigate the complexities of building a relationship while maintaining their individual dreams and identities. Jamie made space in his apartment for some of Alex's coffee equipment. Alex cleared a shelf for Jamie's books. Small gestures that signified something larger taking shape between them. The real test came when Jamie invited Alex to meet his parents, who were visiting for a weekend. Despite the progress they'd made in accepting their son's sexuality, Jamie was nervous about introducing Alex as his boyfriend. "What if they're cold to you? What if they make comments about this being a phase? I couldn't bear it if they made you feel unwelcome," Jamie fretted the night before the planned dinner. Alex took Jamie's face in his hands, looking directly into his eyes. "Hey, whatever happens, we face it together. I'm not expecting perfection. Families are complicated. But the fact that you want me to meet them, that means everything." The dinner went better than either of them had anticipated. Jamie's parents were reserved at first, but warmed up when Alex asked thoughtful questions about their life in California and shared stories about his coffee journey. By dessert, Jamie's mother was showing Alex family photos on her phone, and his father was asking interested questions about Alex's cafe dreams. "They like you," Jamie said wonderingly as they walked home afterward, hand in hand under the spring stars. "My mother actually said you were a good influence, because you're an entrepreneur." Alex laughed. "See? Your coffee-obsessed boyfriend has parental approval. Who would have thought?" As spring turned to summer, their relationship deepened. They took weekend trips to nearby towns, exploring local cafes and bookstores. Jamie helped Alex refine his business plan, using his research skills to gather market data and identify potential investors. Alex provided a peaceful space for Jamie to work on his dissertation, knowing when to offer support and when to give him solitude. The cafe remained central to their story. It was where they had met, where they still spent many of their days, Jamie writing at his usual table, Alex working behind the counter, their eyes meeting across the room in moments of shared understanding. The regulars had figured out their relationship, of course, but respected their professionalism during business hours, save for the occasional knowing smile or teasing comment. Eleanor pulled Alex aside one day in July, as he was preparing for the morning rush. "You know," she said casually, "I've been thinking about opening a second location. The old bookstore on Maple Street is closing, and the space would be perfect for a cafe. But I'd need someone to manage it, someone who understands coffee and community." Alex stared at her, hardly daring to believe what she seemed to be suggesting. "Are you offering me a partnership?" Eleanor smiled. "I'm offering you an opportunity. You've got the vision and the passion, Alex. I've watched you develop over these years. You're ready for more responsibility, and frankly, I'm ready to step back a bit. We can work out the financial details, maybe structure it so you can buy in gradually and eventually take over completely." It was everything Alex had been working toward, a chance to create his own space, to bring his cafe dreams to life, but with the security of Eleanor's experience and established brand behind him. He thought of the sketches on his desk, the plans he and Jamie had discussed late into the night, the possibility of building something that was truly his. "I need to think about it," he told Eleanor, his mind already racing with possibilities. "But thank you for seeing something in me." That evening, he and Jamie celebrated with a bottle of champagne on the rooftop of Alex's building, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold and pink. "To new beginnings," Jamie toasted, clinking his glass against Alex's. "Into the most amazing cafe this city has ever seen." Alex took a sip of champagne, then set his glass down, taking both of Jamie's hands in his. None of this would be happening without you, you know. Your belief in me, your practical help with the business plan, the way you push me to think bigger about what's possible. Jamie shook his head. I just recognized what was already there. You've had this in you all along, Alex. I'm just lucky enough to be alongside you while you make it happen. As the stars began to appear above them, Alex thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a rainy afternoon and a conversation about coffee and poetry to this rooftop, holding hands and planning futures. It had begun with coffee, with the simple act of brewing something special for a stranger who became so much more. Move in with me, Alex said suddenly. Or I could move in with you. Or we could find a new place together. I want to come home to you every day, not just some days. Jamie's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Yes, he said simply. To any of those options. All that matters is that we're together. Later that night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of Alex's apartment, Jamie propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at Alex with an expression of wonder. Do you ever think about how many things had to align for us to meet? If I hadn't decided to try a new cafe that day, if you hadn't been working that shift, if I'd chosen a different topic for my dissertation that didn't require caffeine and concentration. Alex reached up to trace the line of Jamie's jaw with his fingertips. I think we would have found each other somehow. Some connections are just meant to happen. Jamie leaned down to kiss him softly. Like coffee and poetry. Different languages for the same thing. Finding beauty in the everyday, creating moments that matter. As they drifted towards sleep, Alex thought about the cafe that would soon be his to shape, about the life he and Jamie were building together, about all the mornings to come when they would share coffee and conversation and the simple joy of being exactly where they belonged. With each other. In the months that followed, Alex and Jamie moved into a slightly larger apartment halfway between the cafe and the university. They transformed it into a space that reflected both of them, bookshelves intermingling with coffee equipment, Jamie's academic papers sharing desk space with Alex's business plans, photographs of their adventures together hanging on the walls. It became their sanctuary, the place where they could be entirely themselves, together. The new cafe location progressed from dream to reality. Alex and Eleanor worked out a partnership agreement that would allow him creative control while benefiting from her business acumen. Jamie helped with everything from designing the interior layout to crafting the perfect menu descriptions. They spent weekends hunting for the right furniture, debating paint colors, and testing different coffee blends to create a signature house roast. When opening day finally arrived, Alex stood behind the counter of what was now officially Narrative Coffee and Books, a name Jamie had suggested, combining their passions, looking out at the space they had created. The exposed brick walls were lined with bookshelves featuring works by local authors and LGBTQ+ writers. Comfortable seating arrangements encouraged conversation and community. A small stage in the corner awaited poetry readings and acoustic performances. Behind the counter, state-of-the-art coffee equipment gleamed, ready to transform carefully selected beans into experiences. Jamie was the first customer, approaching the counter with a proud smile. What would you recommend for someone who's incredibly proud of his boyfriend and wants to celebrate a dream coming true? Alex leaned across the counter to kiss him quickly. For you? Something special. Something that tells a story about where we've been and where we're going. As he prepared a pour-over using beans from the same Ethiopian region as the very first coffee he'd made for Jamie, Alex felt a sense of completion. This cafe, this relationship, this life they were building together, it had all begun with a simple invitation, with coffee brewed in his apartment on a snowy evening. Now they were creating a space where others might find their own connections, their own beginnings. Jamie took a sip of the coffee Alex handed him, recognition dawning in his eyes. The first coffee you ever made me. You remembered. I remember everything about us, Alex said simply. Every cup, every conversation, every moment that brought us here. As the cafe filled with customers throughout that first day, Alex caught glimpses of Jamie moving through the space, helping an elderly woman find a comfortable seat, recommending books to browsing customers. Occasionally catching Alex's eye across the room with a smile that still made his heart skip. This was what Alex had always wanted, not just a cafe, but a place where people felt welcome, where connections could form, where community could thrive. And at the center of it all was the most unexpected and precious connection of his own life, the literature professor who had walked in seeking coffee and inspiration, and who had become the co-author of a story more beautiful than either of them could have written alone. That night, after closing, they sat together at a table by the window, the only light coming from a small lamp and the streetlights outside. The cafe was quiet now, holding the echoes of the day's conversations and laughter. "So," Jamie asked, reaching across the table to take Alex's hand, "was it everything you hoped it would be?" Alex looked around at the space they had created, then back at the man who had helped make it possible, the man who had become home to him in every sense of the word. "It's better," he said softly, "because you're here. Because we built it together." Outside, the city continued its rhythm, people passing by the window on their way to their own stories. Inside, in the warm quiet of the cafe that had grown from dream to reality, Alex and Jamie sat hand in hand, two people who had found each other over coffee and poetry, who had brewed something more precious than either of them had been looking for, who had created their own perfect blend of passion, purpose, and love. And as they shared a kiss across the table, a kiss that tasted of coffee and possibility and home, they both knew that this was just the beginning of their story, with many more chapters waiting to be written together. Total _char_count, 26,573.